Female founders, have you ever faced bias and discrimination while building your business and when raising capital? Hello. Our guest is sharing her advice and tactics for navigating and the bias and discrimination while launching as female. Stay tuned for the Startup Life Live Show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Startup Life Live Show. I'm your host, Ande, Lyons, startup coach to first-time founders. And after raising 4 businesses of my own, I now help newly minted business owners sleep through the night by giving them peace of mind because, hello, a new business does not come with instructions, right? Thank you for carving out time to tune in and up your founder game. For those of you watching the video and now and via the replay, I would be so grateful for a like on the video. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I am so excited to introduce you to our guest today, author Susanne Althoff. She's the author of, see this fabulous book right here? Launching While Female, Smashing the System That Holds Back Women Entrepreneurs. And wow, did she have a lot of great information to share. In this book, she investigated the obstacles women and non-binary entrepreneurs, especially those of color, face when launching, funding, and growing their companies. Obstacles that persist because the current startup world was engineered by and for, that's right, white men. And a veteran journalist, seasoned journalist. And we know her here in Boston because she was the editor of the Boston Globe for 6 years. Susanne is an assistant professor at Emerson College here in Boston, where she teaches publishing, entrepreneurship, and women's media. She's also served as an advisor to women-led startups. Let's give a round of applause and a hearty welcome to our guest today. Hello, Susanne. How are you?
Hi, Ande. I'm great. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, I'm so thrilled. You know, where are you hailing from today, Susanne?
Just north of Boston, so close to you.
Okay, so yeah, I'm in Andover, everybody. And so that's where I'm hailing, right north of Boston as well. Susanne is right here with us, and we're getting prepared for a nice nor'easter.
Yeah.
I know we're not going to see much, maybe about 6 inches around north of Boston, but south of Boston, they're getting slammed. And so this is a great time, just to add even more fun to the pandemic. Here we are hanging out, getting ready for snowstorms, getting ready for the holidays. Those of you tuning in, you know how I feel about live shows, whether it's on a webinar, a Zoom, or on a platform like I have right here, StreamYard. You need to still be networking. I know we can't meet anywhere in person, but you need to be showing up and sharing who you are, and also reaching out and finding out about who else is on the thread with you. And here's why. You never know where your next collaboration will come from. And by sharing your LinkedIn profile, by sharing your business, especially in the Startup Life Live Show, you put your business URL and name into a comment thread, and I'm bringing it up right here on the screen, and we're going to do a little woo. But any of these live events, you need to get out there and share who you're doing, who you are, and follow folks. Get that reciprocity going and reach out and connect and find good conversations. It's so important for you and for your business. So, Susanne, we are streaming live right now across LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Periscope, and Twitch. So it's always fun to see who might pop up and say hello. Remember, your comments are important. Any questions that you may have during this conversation, I'll continue to remind you to pop them into the comment threads. We'll bring them up and, and share what it is that you have to offer, or any concerns you have, any stories you might have regarding bias and discrimination. Put them into the comment threads, and we can get Susanne's take on them based on her fabulous book right here, Launching While Female. I have to tell you, this is me right now. Susanne, I love this conversation. I graduated from Simmons School of Management here in Boston. It was for decades an all-women's MBA program, and it was founded by two professors out of Harvard Business School who got tired, and they're PhD professors who got tired of seeing the bias and the discrimination in the classroom, in the case studies. And so they went around and found a school that would help them launch an MBA program for women so that they could prepare women for leading and working with men. It was wonderful. Have you had any experience with the Simmons School of Management, Susanne?
I don't, but Ande, I'm so glad you brought that up and the need to create a program like Simmons. And that was something that was really interesting in my book research. I looked at Harvard MBA's program, which did not allow women students into its full MBA program until 1963, right? Which is not that long ago. For the book, I had the pleasure of interviewing Lillian Lincoln Lambert, who was the first Black woman to receive her MBA from Harvard Business School. She received it in 1969. So, yeah.
That's terrific. You know what the professors found, these two female professors, they found that there were a lot of semantics. So the men and the women were often saying the same things, but coming from the perspective of female versus male, and that the men just sort of took over the classroom. And the women did not know how to navigate that. They did not know how to get the professor's attention, et cetera. It was fascinating, which is why I'm like this over this topic. So folks, get ready to take notes, get ready to up your game as a woman founder. And speaking of an amazing, Whitney, that photo. So Susanne, Whitney just had a rebrand happen. It is stunningly gorgeous. It is filled with her brand promise. And that photo, love it. Yes.
I second that.
It's terrific. And we are excited to share this information with you. So I'm always curious, as you all know, lots of curiosity in this head of mine. I want to know, Susanne, I mean, yes, you're a seasoned journalist here in Boston. You've been in business, you've understood, you've watched this whole landscape happen, but why? Like, what compelled you to do the research and write while launching while female? And also, why you? Because this is another thing. And, you know, women founders, any founders go through this where they feel uniquely called. And you were uniquely called to be the one to investigate this inequity and to dive deep into this unconscious/conscious bias for female founders and especially women of color founders. All right, the floor is yours. Share.
Thank you, Ande. Yes, so for me, it really started back in my previous career when I was at the Boston Globe. And if I can add one detail to the bio that you read off for me, I was for 6 years the editor of the Boston Globe magazine, so the Sunday magazine, not the entire Boston Globe. And I was at the Globe for 12 years total. It was an amazing experience being at the Globe. And that is really where I was bitten by the entrepreneurial bug. I was really excited to be part of several product launches at the Globe. And so I saw the whole entrepreneurial process. I saw the prototypes, you know, doing market research, and I absolutely fell in love with that process. And as I studied more the entrepreneurial space, I began to hear more of the statistics that so many of us know, these really depressing statistics. You know, for example, the fact that women founders receive less than 3% of the venture capital in this country each year. And so I wanted to use my journalistic lens to examine this issue more closely. And then when I transferred over into an academic life and I became a professor, I began mentoring students who were starting their own companies while they were still in school. And it just so happened that everyone that I was mentoring was a woman, and they would come into my office and, you know, again and again, I heard stories about, you know, I feel like my ideas are not being taken seriously, or I'm hitting a brick wall. I feel like there's bias happening. My ideas are belittled. So with those stories fresh in my mind, I wanted to use my journalistic skills to hear from women entrepreneurs as well as non-binary entrepreneurs and really understand what they are experiencing on the ground, and then to hear specifically from them what we could all be working on to make the space better, more inclusive for everyone.
So how did you start, and where did you start? And how did you know who to reach out to have these conversations?
So the process all told took 4 years. So I started in 2017. And in the end, I ended up interviewing over 100 women and non-binary entrepreneurs. So early on, I knew I wanted to reach people in all industries. So tech, of course, is important to this story, but I wanted food and finance and fashion and media. And I knew I wanted to reach people all around the country. So again, Silicon Valley is important to this story, as is Boston and New York. But I also wanted to find people in Washington State and in Florida and in Texas, because there's entrepreneurial activity happening all over the country. And we need to, when we think about solutions, we need how it would work all across the country. So it was just reaching out to people, ending every phone call with, who else should I talk to? Could you open up your network to me? And people were amazingly generous with their time and wanted to talk and wanted to share their stories.
And what I love about the book, everybody, is that each chapter starts off with an example story, right? You start off with a female founder and her story, which makes it really interesting. And then you bring in the research, then you bring in your guidance and your advice and, and reflection on how we can, as you say, smash this, system that we have in place. Because I don't know if you know Mandela Hodge-Dixon, but she is the founder of Founder Gym. And the quote I read from her that had me a couple of years ago just go chasing her everywhere she glowed was that it's a meritocracy out there, not a meritocracy. Can you speak to that? Because, we can think about it, but there's this mythology that tends to be out there about this egalitarian, the entrepreneurship and startup space is egalitarian. But you know what? You can't be what you can't see, folks.
Yeah, thank you, Ande. I'm so glad that you brought that up. I mean, this meritocracy myth is alive and well in so much of American life. And I'll start by answering your question by giving an example that's outside of the startup space. There's a study that came out last year that really has stayed with me. It was out of Georgetown University, and it showed that rich kids with low test scores end up faring better in their lives when they grow up than poor kids with high test scores. So this was a study that followed these children into adulthood. And, this study and others like it tell us again and again that it's not just talent and drive that determines who succeeds and who doesn't. I mean, obviously these are important ingredients, but there's so much more. There's sexism, there's structural racism, and so absolutely, we need to do more talking about this meritocracy myth. Right. In the startup space, it repeats itself over and over again, right? The best ideas, the most driven and talented entrepreneurs should succeed, right? That's what if you stop someone on the street, they'll probably say that.
And they have poster examples. I want to say not poster kids, but I mean, they have these, posters that they put up and say, see, and see.
Yes. And I think if you ask investors, and I spoke to a venture capitalist who confessed this, investors will say, I just invest in the best ideas. It doesn't matter to me who the founder is. I want to make large returns and I go after the best ideas. But again and again, we see that that's not the case. There have been studies that have been done that investors view pitches from male entrepreneurs differently than pitches from women entrepreneurs. And Ande, I know on this program, you've talked about the kinds of questions that women entrepreneurs ask, that researchers have seen this in studies, that women get asked about potential losses, whereas male entrepreneurs get asked about potential gains.
That's right.
I can tell you one story, Ande, that occurred during the book research that was really moving to me. I got the chance to interview Allison Clift-Jennings. She is a serial entrepreneur in Reno, Nevada. Allison is transgender, and for much of her startup experience, most of her startup experience, she was perceived as a white, heterosexual, cisgender man. So now today she can compare her experience that she is seeing today with her previous experience being perceived as as a white man. And she realizes now how many advantages she received when she was perceived as a white man. You know, people assuming that she knew exactly what she was talking about, that she had expertise, that she should be someone who should be listened to, and that her ideas had weight. And Allison told me a really moving story about she was participating on a panel discussion. This was before her transition, and the topic of meritocracy came up. And she said at the time, you know, no, the best ideas win. And today she regrets making that statement on that stage and says, no, it's just not true. And she gave the example of a Black queer woman. Her starting line is different than a white male's starting.
Oh yeah, they're, you know, starting at home on the plate. Okay, they're up to bat versus those that are on third base. That's where they're starting. You know, that's such a great story. I in another podcast that I used to have back in the day, I interviewed a woman who transitioned from a male and used to run the entire West Coast seaboard operations for a big auto manufacturer. Everybody loved him, gave him so much, made his life phenomenal. And it was that same thing. The minute he transitioned, he had to leave. He could not get any respect anywhere. And I want to go back to the fact that VC says, I invest in the merit of the idea. First of all, I don't care who you are. That's not true. They always invest in the team that's going to execute and implement. So that's a lie he or she's telling himself. I guess it was a man. But also, that just shows how unconscious the bias is. They tell themselves this story. And who likes to come between someone and their story, right? But that's a powerful story that I invest in the merit of the idea. No. Anyway, what are some of the examples? I mean, I love that story about Allison. That is so powerful. Anybody, you know, want to give me a thumbs up or a fist bump or a high five in the comment threads? That is so powerful. And that's a perfect example of what we are up against as women and what Susanne talks about in Launching While Female. Because these are stories and case studies you would not hear otherwise. And when I was talking earlier about case studies, you know, Harvard Business School teaching women in their MBA program without a single woman leader in the case studies. It was all men. Okay. So, and that took years for, I think maybe in the 80s, Susanne, they may have started to create Harvard Business School case studies with women in leadership positions. Don't get me started.
But Ande, but still to this day, there are not enough women protagonists in these case studies. And I will also add Black entrepreneurs of color are also not fully represented in these case studies that a business student would encounter, you know, today in 2020.
That's right. And yeah, yes, folks, I've been around for decades. I earned my MBA in 89, but I have been reading and talking about the Boys Club since, you know, 87. And, you know, this club that we don't really understand or maybe know about or think that, oh, that's dissolved, especially for our younger female founders who may be coming up and may have had more inclusivity. And they might be in their early 20s and feel like, oh, no, I'm respected. That, you know, I'm sure a few of you have heard about that. Please share how the Boys Club will impact female founders in 2021.
Yes, we see the Boys Club in a number of ways in the entrepreneurial space. I will highlight funding because that's such a big one. You know, I already mentioned the statistic about women founded startups receiving less than 3% of the venture capital investment in this country. And the numbers are even lower for women entrepreneurs who are Black or Latinx or Indigenous. And there's great research on why this is the case. Part of the explanation for these funding numbers is who are the investors in the country right now. The vast majority of venture capitalists still to this day are white men. Surveys have shown a significant number of them attended Harvard or Stanford. So investors often invest in founders who are like them or who are in their network or referred to them by a warm introduction, right? It's like, I know someone who knows someone who can get you in. So this needs to be addressed, and there are fortunately movements afoot that are looking at this. I'm really excited by the work, in particular, of the nonprofit called Raise, which just announced that it has raised $11 million for its work. Yes, a big shout out. So their work is bringing more women into venture capital firms, bringing them in at the junior level so that they can grow and mature there, but the ones who are senior level, helping them continue to succeed and to rise up in the ranks. So basically changing who is sitting at the investor table. So that is going to address the boys club that you mentioned. And Ande, you asked specifically about 2021. So what happened during this year, during the pandemic, and what are we looking forward to next year? PitchBook, which collects data on venture capital investment, has, this was in the third quarter of this year, noted that the funding for women-founded startups has dropped in the third quarter. So the pandemic has had an effect on the amount of money raised. And what I'm hearing on the ground from women founders and from non-binary founders and founders of color as well, I'm hearing that a lot of investors are restricting their investments to founders they already know, people who are already in their network, because it's, as you noted at the beginning of the show, it's hard to meet people, it's hard to network, you don't bump into someone anymore at an event. So it in a way, it makes sense why they are focusing on people they've met previously and
trust.
Yeah, but this is underrepresented founders out in the cold.
Well, and also you have to remember a couple of things here. I've got a few things I want to talk about here. I think I may be having, let me just grab it here. I think I may be having one of these moments here, folks. An Ande Litch's moment. And that's because there's a couple of things going on in the VC world. First of all, there's this whole trust. You have to have a warm introduction, okay? And that is important. Well, how do you get a warm introduction so that your deal can be heard? Okay. The second thing is they're bringing in a lot of female folks into the venture world, but they're not the ones making the decisions yet. And a guy still has to sign off. And I'm always curious, how are those women negotiating with the men that this is a good deal and they need to invest in it? Because again, we have to understand the VC's mentality. They've raised all this money. They owe the people who have funded their fund a really good return. So a lot of times they're basing their decisions on, I know these guys will make it happen. Women, I don't know. What if they have children? What if they, incredible bias thoughts go through their head. And so we have to understand that they have an agenda. And to me, that's what needs to change. And that's why I've seen in different smaller funds out there, like Backstage Capital, you interview Arlen Hamilton, which is so wonderful in one of your chapters, who don't have to go through that. They can have the conversation with their team, put the deal through their funnel and filter, and come out and say, okay, this is where we're going. And they know, every funder knows that the deal could fall, high percentage that it may not have a return. That's part of the game. But they still need to have a level of responsibility to the fund and the agenda of the fund. And I know I just went off everybody, but this is what happens. I see, and I still too, Susanne, I see them bringing women in, but they're women with traditional degrees, coming from a traditional background. So it's almost like men in women's outfits. I don't know if you remember, you're old enough to remember, but in the 80s when women were really starting to get into finance, they wore the blue suits with the little bow ties so that they could look like guys. Thank God those days are over. That's how I'm feeling when I look at the landscape that they are talking. I want a scorecard, Susanne. I want a scorecard that says, you said this and you're not walking your talk, you get the buzzard.
Yeah, and there's really interesting research about being the only person in a room who is like you. And this is why it is so important not to just bring one woman onto a venture capital firm, or just to add one woman to a board of directors, or add one woman to a business school classroom. There's intense pressure on that only person. They are often subjected to more microaggressions, and it's hard for them to shift the thinking of the group. So to your point about who's being hired and who's being promoted at VC firms, we need to see a lot of women investors working and working at senior level positions.
Right. So I need someone to get onto Airtable and make the scorecard that has the VC firm's name, their statement about investing in underrepresented founders, and let's talk about how well they're doing. Let's, 5 stars. Let's talk about it. I just feel so strongly that so much of it, and especially here in Boston, just saying, it's, a lot of talk and not as much walk, and I'm not seeing it. And I have to get off my soapbox right now. Let me say hi to a few folks. Hello, Mia Voss. Mia's joining me on December 22nd. We're going to have our Santa hats on and we're clinking. And it's all about silver bells and silver linings from 2020. And looking forward to 2021. Incredible live stream host right here. Thank you, Whitney, for this case studies of women and non-binary founders. Yeah, the data does need to come to life. We hear those numbers, right, Susanne? But without the stories that you share in your book, Launching While Female, it doesn't mean anything. And so that's the beauty of that. Hey, Sat, so good to see you. Hi, love that. And Deborah, who is recovering, so happy you're feeling better. It was great to hear. Had COVID, Susanne, so it's been a struggle out there for her. Okay, so everybody knows that we've been through this hashtag MeToo movement, right? And now we're all feeling much braver about talking about our Me Too moments. And so, and as a hard hat gal in construction, I know, have seen plenty of Me Too moments, Mia. And yes, you're an only as well. But, it's one thing to now say, okay, hashtag Me Too, but there are ramifications. There are consequences when you step into, oh, no, you don't. Okay, how can we handle that? I mean, I can't begin to start on the list of my own hashtag Me Too. I've been around so long, seen it. And frankly, many of us just accepted it until the last 5 years when we said, okay, we have a voice around this now. Please share with our listeners and our viewers how we can manage this Me Too movement. And when the inappropriate, unacceptable comments happen, they're awful. And folks, if you have any that you throw them in the comment threads.
Thank you, Ande, for raising this. This is a really important subject to talk about. So I noted that for my book, I interviewed over 100 women and non-binary entrepreneurs. It was quite depressing, the number of times that I heard stories of sexual harassment and sexual assault directed at entrepreneurs. There was a study 2 years ago by Inc. magazine and Fast Company magazine, and they found that 53% of women founders reported experiencing either harassment or discrimination while running their company.
Can you say that number again, please?
53%. And I'll add another finding from that same study: most did not report it. So this is something that we need to talk about, but I just want to cite one more statistic. This is not unique to the entrepreneurial space at all. Government statistics show that 60% of women in the workplace experience some kind of harassment and assault. And again, most go unreported. And that's, in 2017, especially, a lot of these stories broke out, were publicized, and it was long overdue that these stories were made public and that some people were held accountable for their actions. But there are so many stories, and this is what came up in my interviews. I heard from women founders talking about investors saying, he did something inappropriate and it's no one knows, he's still getting away with it. And there's it's a difficult calculation for founders to figure out, should I speak up? Should I keep quiet? Again and again, I heard stories that founders would tell me, I don't want to jeopardize my company. I want my company to succeed no matter what. And I know that if I speak up, perhaps I will be labeled as difficult, or no one will want to take a meeting with me. And that's too much of a cost for my company. But on the other hand, if I don't speak up, this behavior will continue. And it's almost sending the message that it's appropriate behavior when it's, anything but. So it's not an easy question to answer. Should I come forward or not? What I'm hearing from the people that I'm interviewing is that there are changes that are happening slowly, much slower than they should, that a lot of the really egregious behavior is not happening at the same rates as it used to be. There is an awareness and people are talking about it. But
Susanne, we need a video of what it means to say, because learned behavior, lived experiences happen. These boys become men. They see the conversations, locker room type conversations going around, and it comes flying out of their lips, I think, before they even think about it. And so, we need either in written form or video examples of people saying things so we can reprogram the conversation so that, it's not, TNA stuff. We're talking about just what happened. Mia brought this up here. What happened to Dr. Jill Biden with that Wall Street Journal article? Get rid of the doctor. Kiddo. Yeah. And calling her kiddo, right? Yeah. Just like, folks, if you want to know, that's a prime example of belittling and marginalizing when you are a woman for your accomplishments, especially if you are in partnership with a male who has power. And so
we talked about, let's create a video, and let's ask and continue to ask men, the good guys, to speak up.
Yes.
Over here in inappropriate comment, stop the meeting and address it, because that's powerful. And if you are in a position of power, if you're senior leadership, if you're a white man especially, and you can, expend some of your social capital on stopping these conversations, that's needed.
It's really needed, guys. And so, so we should work in some kind of collaboration. So the men are sitting there saying, in a meeting, that's unacceptable behavior, because I think too, they need to be educated on what it means to stop that conversation in a way too, that helps them get the message across, because everybody is in a juxtaposition, trying to get their space of power, and nobody wants to lose their position in life, in their professional field, or where they are, how they're perceived. So I see all these different obstacles for having that happen, but I love that you brought that up, that men have to pave the way. I have had men create amazing opportunities for me. Susanne, have you had men step up and help you in your career?
Absolutely, yes. And you're sort of hinting at mentorship or sponsorship. We need a big group of mentors and sponsors behind us. And as if we're a woman founder, shouldn't just have women mentors and sponsors. We need the whole village behind us.
Okay. Now that I've got to go right here, because that is a stitch that on a pillow. It takes a village to raise a business, folks. And you do need your male champions out there. I love that. Something fierce, Susanne. We're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater here. We're asking our men to step up, stop the discrimination and the bias, because women want this mentorship. And, we saw what happened in Hollywood. And that's, it's not, it can be very similar in the workforce. Okay. That same kind of, well, if you tickle me, I'll take you up another notch type of thing. But, and women not knowing how to handle that, because their work is so rewarding and so important to them, and they don't want to jeopardize it. How can we get those kind of mentorships? We don't want to close the doors, as you often say, because of the Me Too movement. What can we do, Susanne?
Yeah, Ande, I'm glad you connected the Me Too movement, especially to mentorship. There are some troubling studies that are coming out since about 2 years now that show that there's a growing number of senior level men who are saying they are reluctant to mentor women because of the Me Too movement. They say, the relationship may appear inappropriate, or I might be accused of something, so I'd rather not mentor these women or be seen, alone with them in a meeting room. And so this is absolutely problematic for women, for them to be iced out of these kind of really crucial relationships. And in my interviews, I saw again and again how important mentorship is for all founders, but especially founders just at the very early stages of their entrepreneurial journey. And I'll add mentorship plus sponsorship. So sponsorship is the more active role that you take in someone's life. Picking up the phone and making an introduction for them, vouching for their good ideas, inviting them to an event where they otherwise wouldn't have a seat at the table. There's interesting research about sponsorship. Most sponsors prefer mini-me's. So they prefer protegees who share their race or their gender. So again, this is problematic for women entrepreneurs, gender expansive entrepreneurs, or entrepreneurs of color, because most of the people who would be ideal mentors or ideal sponsors tend to be white men, because we often look to CEOs or business school professors or people, older people in senior positions. So we need people behind us.
And how can we women, how do we navigate that? Because we want that championship, that sponsorship, those introductions. It took them decades to build up their cred. Opening doors is really important for us.
Yes. Well, Ande, people like you and me who are at the moment not active founders, we need to keep talking about this and keep encouraging everyone, men and everyone else, to serve as a mentor or a sponsor, and to make sure that you are mentoring and sponsoring a large group of people who don't share qualities with you, and you will get as much out of the relationship as you give. You will learn lots of things about your industry and digital trends and whatever it may be, and then there's lots of good advice out there about how to be a better mentee, how to make sure you are delivering something of value and you're part of the relationship. There's also a good book out right now called Good Guys, by Brad Johnson and David Smith. And it specifically speaks to men and helps them become better mentors and better sponsors.
That's wonderful news. Good Guys, everybody. I love that somebody wrote that. Could you just define a little bit what microaggression looks like? Can you give some examples and some of what you learned while you were doing the research for your book? Because a lot of times, passive aggressive, women, we see a lot of that among ourselves, but microaggression, that has a little bit of a spin.
Yes. So microaggressions are the endless stream of little insults, being belittled, being overlooked, being put down. These are lobbed at anyone who is marginalized in a situation. So women, people of color, people who are LGBTQ. The microaggressions, these are small acts. And, a lot of people say, it was just a joke, or brush it off. It's, we all hear insults from time to time. The thing, though, about microaggressions are that it's this constant shower of hearing these, day after day, meeting after meeting. And they have an effect. They erode confidence. They lead to second guessing. They're distractions. They add to our mental stress load. So we need to attack and find a way to stop microaggressions.
And dissolve that, because, it does take a toll. And also you don't, it's just a joke, or you need to toughen up, or you're taking things personally. finding ways to respond to that in a way that shuts that down.
Yes. And so this is similar to our discussion about sexual harassment and assault. You have to kind of figure out, when do I bring it up and when do I let it slide? Because again, you can't spend your entire day correcting people and helping people see how the damage of their words. So the founder herself needs to figure out when to speak up and when not. But this also gets back to mobilizing bystanders. When we hear something that is inappropriate, we can speak up in a meeting, or when we hear someone's idea is being talked over, we can say, no, let's hear one more time what Sandra had to say. Mary Rowe is an economist out of MIT, and she's done really interesting work on micro-affirmations, which is a way to combat microaggressions. Micro-affirmations are small acts that all of us can practice, lifting people up, broadcasting their good work, using social media or doing it in person, telling someone, I believe in you, this is a great idea, I'm going to help you get forward. These can counteract the damage done by microaggressions. And you're also modeling good behavior when you use micro-affirmations, because other people see you lifting up important, or people who are doing good work.
I love that. Micro-affirmations, everybody. Okay. But also, when you mentioned mobilizing bystanders, you're not an innocent bystander if you're watching this stuff go down and not do anything about it. You need to speak up and feel confident to speak up as you observe something. A lot of times it can't be the person who's being bullied or having the target of the microaggression that can actually say something. It has to be those who are observing it and learning how to stand up to it. And speaking of good men, ta-da! Hi, Dalton. We continue to acknowledge the good men who elevate and support women leaderships and contribute in the workplace without bias. Well said. And to continue, let us increase dialogue between men and women and other suppressed groups and create role play case studies so that the good men can teach other men to remove their phobias. What do you think about that, Susanne?
Love it.
That is so great. And yeah, I'm right there with you with the clapper, Mia, the microaggression affirmations. I mean, there we go. And it's replacing bad language with good, in my opinion. You also talk in your book about, I think we touched on a little bit about the coalition theory for founder support, reaching out to others and finding solidarity. Can you speak a little bit about that too?
Absolutely. Speaking up, as we've talked about, speaking up when you see something that is wrong. I would also add to that, speaking up and talking about how beneficial it is for all of us when we see full entrepreneurial activity in our communities and in our country. There's one statistic that I love to talk about, and that is the researchers who found that if women launched high growth startups at the same rate as men, we'd have 15 million additional jobs in this country in 2 years. So 15 million additional jobs. I think this is a really important statistic to think about in light of the pandemic and the job losses that we are seeing and the number of businesses that are closing. And we all acknowledge that we're going to have to rebuild our economy in a significant way now and in the coming months. And we can't do this and have some people sitting on the sidelines. We need everybody involved. When we support entrepreneurs of color, when we support women entrepreneurs, we are all standing to benefit. We're getting better economy, we're getting more jobs, and we're getting cool products and services that we would not otherwise have, right? I mean, this is such a common thing in the entrepreneurial space that entrepreneurs often are solving an unmet need, or an unmet need that they're experiencing, or an unmet need that they see in their community. So in order for us to have all of these unmet needs met, we need everyone with different experiences, different backgrounds, different points of view to be innovating and coming up with companies.
Absolutely. We're here to delight customers with our solutions by solving a problem that they have. And that's, and by not investing in the companies that are run by people of color, women founders. We're not understanding a segment of the population that they have an ability, a unique ability to reach, but also a solution that is so delicious that we would never have thought about it because of our lived experience being different than their lived experience. So that whole diversity is so key to invest in and grow. We have a local investor, David Chang. Suzanne, I don't know if you know, do you know David?
I do, and I watched the show with David.
Oh, great.
I think it was October and Halloween.
Yes, exactly. Well, folks, listen to this. David was invited to be on a board for this company. So he gets there and attends the first meeting, and it's all guys. And he goes, I'm sorry, I'm resigning because a woman needs to be here. That to me is the brilliant example. Yes, Suzanne?
I saw that. I saw David tweet that, and oh my goodness, I love it. Yes, that's absolutely important what he's doing. And you know, if I may say something quick, Ande,
Yeah.
Talking so much about women entrepreneurs and the entrepreneurial's gender gap, I do want to emphasize that we can't let our efforts focus just on white women founders. And this happens a lot with diversity and inclusion efforts that look at gender, that they end up benefiting white women only. And that would be a huge mistake. Women of color need to be supported and have amazing businesses. And so I just, this can't be a white woman thing.
And think about the scaling, okay? If women were to scale, it would take them, and got the funds to support scaling, it would take them 2 years to create, what'd you say, 15 million jobs?
15 million, yes.
Oh my God, that gives me goosebumps. And this is the purpose behind Founder Gym, folks. With Mandela, you know, it's primarily for people of color, helping them raise capital. It's a 6-week program. And you'll love this, there's an article, a CNN article, about the 90 women of color who raised over $1 million for their business. 9 of them were trained by Founder Gym, and Founder Gym is barely 3 years old. You know, this is so profound, and I'm sorry that there were only 90 who raised over $1 million. That just shows the work that needs to happen for our female founders of color. It is so important. Thank you, Mia. Yep, fist bump and a hip bump on that. You know, diversity works. And, you know, every day, you're right, we will keep this conversation going, Suzanne, around how we can support our women of color to get them the funding they need, the training they need to be the best founders they can be and to realize their vision. And of course, you know, people always hear me talk about scaling is great, but that's okay if you want to scale to the point where you're serving the community. Yeah, you can be a respectable company at $1 million in revenue, at 10 million in revenue. But if you're really feeling like I had Tia Lyles Williams on, and she is a woman of color from the LGBTQ community, Suzanne, and her big, hairy, audacious idea is she's building a co-manufacturing plant for pharmaceutical drugs. So she got her second master's so she could understand regulatory challenges in the biochem world, but she's building this facility outside of Philly, 60,000 square feet, because her real big mission is to give great jobs to folks in underserved communities. And she's been raising millions, and it's coming to fruition. It's very, very exciting. It's a terrific example. What is one of your favorite stories? I mean, I know it's like a mom, I can't say which one is my favorite kid, but what is one of the favorite stories that you have from your book that you can share with folks?
Oh gosh, yes, it is like picking a child. Farah Allen is one entrepreneur that I'm a big fan of. She is based in Atlanta. Her company is called the Labz, which is a blockchain enabled platform that helps music creators document and copyright their creations. I met Farah Allen 2 years ago when I was a audience member at the Big Incubator demo day. The Big Incubator is run by Digital Undivided, and Digital Undivided is the nonprofit that supports Black and Latinx women entrepreneurs. They also do the Project Diane research.
Love Project Diane. We love digital.
Yes. But Farah's company, the Labz, I think it's such a smart idea. It has so many applications. It's, beyond the music industry, the publishing industry, others. So that's one of dozens that have stuck with me. But I also want to add, I have a few stories in the book about companies that have failed. And I felt like that was important to include as well, because that really helps us understand what we can do better. Because we all lose out when a company that should have succeeded doesn't. And so those stories have stuck with me as well.
Yeah, and those stories are important because they didn't fail because of the typical failure, building something that the marketplace didn't want. They did not get the oxygen needed to stay alive. Okay, just take it in that way, folks. Your business, especially if you're growing and scaling, needs oxygen, and it has to come in the form, most often, in capital. And a lot of times, sure, you can be another MailChimp and bootstrap your way to success, but often you're going to need the funds, especially if you're underrepresented, because you can't look to family and friends and say, hey, can you write me a check for 25K or 50, come in on the deal? They're just not there. Oftentimes, I'm generalizing, but right, Susanne?
No, that's an excellent point. That's very important. I write about the racial wealth gap that we have in this country. Black entrepreneurs typically start their companies with less startup capital than white entrepreneurs. We have a gender pay gap in this country. So, a woman who works in industry for, let's say, 5 years or 10 years before she launches her company, chances are she's being paid less than her male counterparts. And so the savings stash that she is growing is smaller than someone else. So both of these need to be addressed when we talk about making entrepreneurship more inclusive.
And, that's one of the reasons that I'm going to go back to Foundership again, because I'm a huge fan, obviously. But they have a program called the Money Magnet Program. It's another 6-week program because we all have our own founder unconscious bias around money, around asking for money and how much to ask for and feeling okay and being okay with that. We do have to have certain mind shifts around money if we weren't exposed to it in a way and didn't understand investing from early on. Susanne, how has this journey into smashing the system that holds women founders back served you, both personally and professionally?
Excellent question. Personally, I am much more careful about my own personal purchasing decisions than I was before I embarked on this research. We hear so much these days about shop your values. And I really, that has meant a lot to me doing this research. How can I make specific decisions where I lift up women-founded companies or companies founded by people of color? Choosing one company over another, depending on who is behind that company. And there's several groups that help people make these decisions and learn more about companies. One of my favorite groups, there's a nonprofit based in Atlanta called Buy from a Black Woman. They have an online directory where you can find companies that produce, like my personal favorite is a company called Harper and Charlotte, which make handmade notebooks and journals, which make great gifts. And so when you're buying from this, you're supporting a Black woman entrepreneur. Another example is Yelp in March of this year lets users search for reviews that mention that a company is woman owned and operated. So again, next time we go to an auto body shop or, make another kind of purchase, can we direct our dollars
and then
to an entrepreneur we want to support?
And here in Boston, Colette Phillips just created I think it's called, GK, Get Connected, marketplace so that you can go there. I'll have all the links, everybody, in the show notes. So you can go there and make your buying decisions based on your values. Shop your values. Walk your talk. And then professionally, how did this help you out?
Yes, well, I teach at the college level. I teach undergrads and grad students, and I teach every one of my students about the entrepreneurial mindset, whether they want to own a company one day or not. And I really am a firm believer that we all should be thinking about entrepreneurial thinking and the entrepreneurial mindset. There's one factoid that comes from the European Union that really is moving to me. The European Union has identified 8 key competencies that every person should have, and on this list of 8, there's things you'd expect like math and reading and writing, but entrepreneurial thinking is one of the 8 that we all need to always think about innovations and thinking about how to solve problems and to be excited about disruption and changes in our country and our industries instead of scared by them. I want all of my students to think about how can I approach my work and my life entrepreneurially. I really want us to be talking to young kids about entrepreneurial thinking, especially young girls. What company are you going to make? How are you going to be a boss? And then at the same time, talking to young boys and getting them comfortable with the idea of having a woman leader and a woman boss. These conversations start small. We're seeing it with coding as well. Black girls code, girls who code. So I would say coding plus entrepreneurial training.
Well, and destination imagination, right? I mean, that's where, I don't know if folks had it, if you had it in the schools with your kids or if you saw it yourself, but kids had to come together to solve a problem. They had parameters, guidelines, and I don't know what the right word is, but a goal for the problem to be solved. They could pick categories, engineering, art, whatever, but they had to come together and they had to think about it and they had to collaborate, and then they had to compete, and it just teaches such great skills. And speaking of shopping your values, hey, Weegleen, how are you? This is the founder, Susanne. She's local here in Boston, of Fusion Dolls, and some beautiful, beautiful dolls that she's created. And she's had a wonderful sale where if you bought one of her dolls, one was sent off to Haiti, which is her home country, and just wonderful. And I'm one of your biggest fans too, Weegleen. Thank you. And I'm going to, Dalton, what have you got here? There needs to be more legislation introduced to make sure that there is education on diversity and the number of women and minority-founded businesses funded. There should be some form of enforcement and accountability and incentives to do the right thing. We lose opportunities for many new inventions, solutions, and greater harmonics in many industries. Oh, yeah. Preach it right there, Dalton. Right, Susanne?
Absolutely. Well, yes, we spent a lot of the hour talking about venture capital, which is important for sure, but we need other funding solutions because venture capital is not for everyone.
That's right.
We need creative startup capital solutions that especially keep in mind the gender gap, the racial wealth gap. I'm really excited about the conversations we're having right now as a country about student debt relief. It feels like we may be at a point where we're actually going to take action on this. And this has a role for entrepreneurs, especially because women have more student debt than men, and Black women have the most student debt as all. Researchers at Northeastern, right, Ande, right here in our backyard, have made a connection between having student debt, that it reduces the likelihood that someone will open a company. And if you start a business, the company will be slower to grow. So getting student debt addressed in our country and specifically with an eye to underrepresented entrepreneurs would be an important step.
Northeastern, by the way, folks, before you sleep or eat is $75K a year. So, nothing wrong with going to a community college, great education. We got Middlesex Community College here. Yeah, my son is getting his game design degree at Fitchburg State. Massachusetts has phenomenal state schools. But I'm glad Northeastern brought that up. And I'd like to see them figure that out. I have a little pet peeve, as you can tell, about what people charge to educate us. And it's all about branding. Hey, Eric Cox from Media Prepared. Yeah, we did. We already talked about the Dr. Jill Biden movement. I'll have it in the notes for a timestamp, because it is a form of microaggression.
Without a doubt, yes.
On all of that. Okay. Any last thoughts for our audience before I wrap the show up, Susanne?
I would say last thoughts is lift up the entrepreneurs that are in your community, in your neighborhood. Ask how we can, those who are underrepresented, how can we get them attention? How can we drive more business to them? How can we share their stories? I mean, that was really one of the reasons why main reasons I wanted to write the book. It's the data is important, but so is hearing firsthand from these founders about what was problematic, what ended up being the success story for them, and how all of us can help them to do better, because we all stand to benefit. Yes, it's the right thing to do, but there's also, if we want to think about it selfishly, there's something in it for all of us if
absolutely
is more inclusive.
And Whitney said that right from the beginning. Your data is brought to life through the stories you tell. Launching While Female. Everybody, go ahead. I'm going to have the links as well, but you can go to Suzanne's website and grab a copy of the book. Really, the stories are wonderful. I am so thrilled that you joined me today to share your story, and I could hear firsthand from you about how we can navigate. Well, we never got into the whole mompreneurs.
Oh, that's for hour 2.
I guess we'll have to do that in hour 2, folks, because mompreneurs, let me tell you, how many times have you been dismissed because you're raising kids? Please. I mean, women can multitask, folks, okay? Plus, we can hire good help. Anyway, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom today, Susanne. And I'm so grateful that you wrote this book. We need this book. We need to understand more. And you brought the data to life, but you also raised our own consciousness today with your insights and the wonderful research that you've done. Thank you so much. And viewers, come on. Was that amazing with Susanne and helping us understand not just female founders and women of color founders, but underrepresented, underserved founders have a place and deserve a place at the table. What can we do as bystanders to make that happen? Thank you so much for tuning in, and be sure to click that like button on the video and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm so grateful that you're here. And, I feel very strongly that founders should not struggle alone. You need sponsorship. And sometimes that can come in the form of working with a founder coach like me. Yay! With whether it's a pitch deck review, on-demand coaching, female founders, that WeBank application is really worth it. You could be leaving money on the table by not leveraging the opportunities in corporate supplier diversity programs or government contracts. Let's chat. If on-demand founder coaching is of interest to you, please book a 15-minute conversation with me and kick the tires, see if we're a good fit. I'd love to learn more about you and your business. And now I got to tell you about who's coming in Friday, December 18th at 1 p.m. My gosh, I've been lucky this week with the local goddesses. This is Marie Meslin. She's the executive director of the Capital Network, which is a nonprofit organization supporting early stage founders with education, mentorship, and access to investors. And she's joining us to chat about a new series of conversations that they've recently produced in collaboration with Brown University's Venture Capital Inclusion Lab. And it's called Investment and Inclusion. And they're exploring how investors can create a more diverse portfolio that will support underrepresented founders while growing their returns. Oh my gosh, we're going to have a delicious conversation with Marie Meslin about the funding for female founders. I just wanted to say quickly, hi, thank you so much, Whitney, for tuning in. Yes, part 2 on mompreneurs. Thank you. I will definitely have Susanne back. We'll get a wonderful conversation about that whole thing, because I know you're a mom and you're making it happen with your business. Thank you, Mia. I look forward to seeing you December 22nd with our Santa hats on and our drinks in hand for some holiday fun. Founders, I am in awe and wonder of what gets you up every day inside of you to go out and work on your business and make things happen in such uncertain times, coupled with the uncertain voyage that you're on as a founder. Please stay strong, stay focused, stay healthy, and remember, you've got this. You really do. Get the right people around you, get the sponsors to help you, and ask for help along the way. It's okay to ask for help, okay? See you next time. Mwah, mwah, mwah.